everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is Mindy Eggen for Tailored Expressions, and in today's video, I'm going to be making two patriotic cards combining new products and previously released products. The products that I'll be using today is the Sketched Flag Background, Building Blocks Brave Editions, Over the Rainbow Stamp, On the Block Brave and its coordinating die. I'll also be using the Starstruck die set, which I left all together so I can just die cut it in one easy pass, and also the Make a Rainbow stencil. I also have some gold glitter cardstock, sugar cube, cherry pop, and gumball cardstock. And my inks include blue corn, blueberry, sprinkles, sugar cube, guava, and cherry pop. I actually don't end up using blue corn, and I do bring in Versamark, so a couple additions there. And my additional supplies that I'll be using are the Bitty blending brushes, the diamond and also white embossing powder, my tweezers, some Post-it tape, an anti-static powder tool, my Scotch tape, and the Berry Art liquid glue. And I also will be using my Misty and the Make Art station. I'm going to start off by getting all of my stamping and heat embossing out of the way, starting with the Sketched Flag Background. So this is a red rubber stamp. Since I'm using my Misty tool, I am going to take the foam out of the Misty. I'm placing my red rubber stamp into the Misty tool and picking that up with the door. And then I'm taking my sugar cube cardstock and putting a little bit of adhesive on the back. And then I'm placing that over my background. That way I'm getting the part of this stamp set that I want to stamp. And then I'm closing that Misty kind of backwards to pick up that paper. And now my cardstock is stuck to the bottom of my Misty. I'm inking up this image with two different colors at one time, starting with the blueberry ink. So I inked the top part of the flag up with the blueberry ink, and the bottom portion I am inking up with a cherry pop, and then I'm going to stamp this down really well. Now, one of the beautiful things of using the Misty is you can stamp it again if you would like, but I felt I had a pretty good impression there, so I am going to leave that. And I'm taking my anti-static powder tool, adding some of that to the background and brushing that around. And now after I cleaned my stamp, I'm inking it up with a Versamark ink. And I'm going to stamp that twice to make sure I have that sticky ink all over that stamped image. And then I'm going to sprinkle on the diamond embossing powder. Now what this is going to do is just add a lot of sparkle to it, and kind of a bonus is it's really going to brighten up this background. So it just really makes these colors pop, and it looks very, very traditional. I love how this embossing powder works on these backgrounds. So after this is all nice and melted, I'm going to just set this off on the side to cool off for a minute and work on some other stamping. I have another piece of sugar cube cardstock that I'm going to stamp the Brave stamp image onto. Notice I have that lined up kind of in the middle of the cardstock. I'm going to stamp this twice, so I have this first one done in blueberry, and then I'm shifting my cardstock up a little bit, and I'm going to kind of just hover over that area to make sure I have enough room to stamp this and also die cut it out. Now what I'm going to do, this one is going to go on the card that has my sketched flag. So I want to two-tone it like my background is, but I want it opposite. So on my card, I have blue on top, red on bottom. So on this brave word, I'm doing red on top and blue on the bottom. I hope I said that right. I'm doing opposite is what I'm doing. So I'm kind of giving this an ombre effect. I started with the cherry pop ink that I inked up halfway down, and then I stamped that down, cleaned the stamp, and now I'm doing the blueberry ink towards the bottom. Now I wanted that blueberry to pop just a little bit more, so I am going to ink it one more time and stamp that down. And to match my sketched flag background, I'm going to heat emboss this with that diamond glitter embossing powder as well. So I prepped that with that anti-static powder, inked this up with my Versamark ink, stamp that down, and then sprinkle on that diamond glitter embossing powder. So this is also going to really make this pop off the card. If you ever want to brighten your colors up, you could always use either the glitter or the regular clear embossing powder, and that's really going to bring these colors right to the forefront. So here are my 2 words that are ready to go, and I'm going to put this off on the side and do one more piece of stamping before I move on to die cutting. This is the Building Blocks Brave Editions. So I loaded that into the MISTI. Once again, I have that foam removed, and I'm going to stamp this on both the Gumball and Cherry Pop ink. Now, a super awesome trick that I have learned recently is if I'm using white embossing powder, I'm going to stamp in pigment white ink or white pigment ink. It just really helps get that white detail in there. It kind of fills in maybe any little speckles that the embossing powder misses. So I highly recommend giving this a try. I try to do this when I remember it. Now I did prep both of my cardstocks with the anti-static powder tool. I stamped this particular one twice in that white pigment ink, sprinkled on the white embossing powder, and then after my heat gun is really nice and hot, I'm going to go through and just melt all of that embossing powder. Now, if you haven't used any of the building block sentiments before or simple strips, you want to make sure you're also stamping and heat embossing those little squares. So then you can line up the coordinating die with those squares on the side, and that's going to allow you to cut all of these sentiments out in one swift shot through your die cutting machine. Now, one more thing I want to add is I'm taking the Starstruck die set and I'm going to die cut this out of the gold glitter cardstock. With dies like this, I like to leave them all just together instead of stimping them apart, and I can just die cut all of them at once. Now, while I was die cutting, I also did the Brave word die 2 more times from white cardstock, and I'm going to layer that all together with my berry art glue and just using my tweezers to hold that. That's going to add just a little bit of dimension versus me trying to cut a bunch of little foam strips. Now I can work on the assembly of my card. So I have that brave word there just as kind of a guide on where I want my stars to go. And I'm adding all of these stars with the liquid glue and my tweezers. And I'm using kind of the rule of 3 or the odd number concept when you're using embellishments. Odd numbers are just kind of more eye appealing, and I'm also doing it in a triangle type of layout. So that way it draws your eye into that sentiment. So after I added that, I'm going to place a block on top of it to kind of help secure that down. And I die cut all of these small sentiments out. So once I picked out the one I wanted, I'm going to just kind of scoop these up and place these into a container to save for future projects. So I did the word hero. So I have brave hero as my sentiment, and I just added that underneath with my tape runner. And that finishes off my first card. For my second card, which is actually an idea that I got off of a kind of patriotic t-shirt, is I'm using the Make a Rainbow stencil. And I thought this would be really neat to do in the patriotic colors. And I'm doing this on top of that Make Art Station. It's a magnetic piece, and you just place your cardstock on top. I layered the rainbow stencil on top of my sugar cube cardstock. I'm not using the alignment guide because I want my rainbow to be higher up on my card so I have room for my sentiment. And then I just took the magnets that come with it and I placed that on top. This holds this down really well. There's not a lot of intricate areas to this. And I'm starting off by blending on some sprinkles ink. And I'm using the bitty blending brushes to do this. Once I have that first color down, I have another arc in here for my rainbow. So I placed the mask over the bigger one, and I'm doing that second arc in the rainbow with the blueberry ink. Now, in between somewhere, I lost a couple of the masking pieces. So you may see me use some of the rainbow masks, and sometimes you're going to see me just masking off the areas because I lost those pieces. Thankfully, these are very easy to mask off. And I'm also using the bitty blender brushes that are fantastic for areas like this. They really get in those small nooks and crannies, and I don't have to have a ton of ink all over my stencil. So once I had that last arc done in the blue ink, I removed that first stencil, brought in the second layer of the stencil, put on my masked pieces, and this first color I'm blending on is guava. And then I can remove my masks. I'm going to put some Post-it tape over that area, and I'm going to ink blend on Cherry Pop. Now, there wasn't like a huge difference in color between the two, so if I were to do this again, I'd maybe use a little bit lighter of a color and just go over it a couple times, but I still think it looks really cool, and it still was going with the idea that I had to have these kind of multiple layers of or multiple colors in the arches. After all of my colors are ink blended on, I'm just going to remove the stencil with my tweezers and my cardstock is ready to add some stamping to it. Now you could leave it just like this, but I thought it would be really neat to add this over the rainbow stamp set. These are just designs that you can add on top of your rainbow. And notice that it's kind of wonky, which is great. I've always said before, embrace the wonky because it's just really fun. It's very playful, but yet it still has a very serious message to it. So I'm using this first arch, which is a little bit larger. It's kind of going in between my two colors. I'm stamping this in the blueberry ink, and I did stamp that twice. And then I have that second arch here with the little polka dots in it. I just thought that was a really cute design to add to the rainbow. And once again, stamping that down in that blueberry ink. Now we're in the home stretch of putting the card together. So here is the sentiment that I did with the Brave on the Block editions. And I did thanks to the, and I'm adding that with a tape runner right under my rainbow, trying to space that out evenly. And then I have my Brave die cut word that I layered together with white cardstock and added right underneath. And that's going to finish up both of my cards for you today. You can find all of these supplies over at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you again soon.